Chapter 5. Noah was smaller than I expected. After years of watching the Nephilim tower over everyone around them, after fighting fallen angels who radiated power like heat from a forge, I suppose I'd started to equate size with significance. But Noah was an ordinary man. Average height, average build, hands roughened by work and weather. When I took my post near his home, the first thing I noticed was how quietly he moved through the world. The second thing I noticed was that he prayed. Not the way Enosh had prayed, with altars and formal offerings at appointed times. Noah prayed while he worked, while he walked, while he sat outside his shelter in the evening watching his sons play in the fading light. It was constant, this conversation he carried with God, and most of it wasn't even words. Just a posture, an openness, like a man standing in a doorway, always ready for someone to come through. I'd been guarding him for 3 days when God spoke to him. I felt it coming before it arrived. A shift in the air. A weight settling over the clearing where Noah lived with his wife and 3 sons. Shem, Ham, and Japheth were inside. Noah was sitting alone, mending a piece of leather by firelight. Then God was there, not visible. Not the way he'd walked with Adam in the garden, but present in a way that made the air itself feel different, denser, like reality had thickened to accommodate what it couldn't quite contain. The fire didn't flicker. The insects went silent. Even the breeze stopped. Noah set down the leather. His hands were trembling, but he didn't stand. He didn't hide. He just lifted his face toward something he couldn't see and waited. I couldn't hear everything God said. That surprised me. I'd heard him speak to Adam, to Eve, to Cain. But this was different. This conversation was for Noah alone, and whatever boundary existed between the words and my hearing, I couldn't cross it. I caught fragments. Phrases that drifted toward me like smoke from a fire. The end of all flesh. The earth is filled with violence. Make yourself an ark. I heard that word clearly. Ark. A vessel. Built to carry what mattered through what was coming. Noah's face didn't change the way I expected. No panic. No disbelief. His eyes filled with tears, but his jaw stayed set. He nodded slowly, like a man receiving news he'd somehow already known was coming. God spoke for a long time. I caught pieces. Gopher wood, pitch inside and out, 300 cubits long, 50 wide, 30 high, 3 decks, a window, a door. The specifics of survival handed down with the care of someone who wanted nothing left to chance. Then I heard the part that mattered most. I will establish my covenant with you. You will enter the ark, you and your sons and your wife and your sons' wives with you. Covenant, a binding promise. God was about to destroy the world, and his first act was to make a promise to save one family. Noah sat by that fire for hours after God's presence lifted. His wife came out once, touched his shoulder, asked if he was all right. He covered her hand with his and said he needed to think. She went back inside without pressing. I watched him. This ordinary man sitting in the dark, carrying the weight of what he'd just been told. Everyone he knew was going to die. His neighbors, his extended family, the people he traded with at the settlements. Every human being on the face of the earth, except the 8 people sleeping inside his shelter. And his response was to sit quietly and think about how to build a boat. The next morning, Noah gathered his sons and told them. I watched their faces. Shem, the oldest, went pale but nodded. He had his father's steadiness, that ability to absorb terrible news without breaking. Ham looked skeptical, his eyes darting between his father and the clear sky overhead. No clouds. No rain. No sign of anything coming. Japheth, the youngest, just stared at his father like he was trying to decide if this was real. "How big?" Shem asked. Noah told him, 300 cubits. The number hung in the air, and I saw Shem do the calculation. His expression shifted from acceptance to bewilderment. "That's..." Shem started, then stopped. He rubbed the back of his neck, staring at the ground like it might offer a different number. "I know," Noah said. Ham crossed his arms. "With what labor force?" he asked. His voice was careful. Not disrespectful, but pointed. "There are 6 of us who can work. 7 when Japheth is strong enough for heavy timber." "6 is enough," Noah said. God didn't say to hire help, he said to build it. Ham looked at his brothers. Japheth hadn't spoken. He just stood there, hands at his sides, watching his father the way a boy watches a cliff edge, trying to judge the distance. Nobody argued. Whatever they thought, whatever doubts they carried, their father had spoken, and he spoke for God. They started the next week. I need to tell you what it was like to watch that ark go up, because I don't think you can understand Noah without understanding the building. The trees came first. Noah and his sons walked deep into the forests east of their settlement, looking for gopher wood. The right kind of timber, dense and resinous, resistant to water. They felled the first tree on a morning so quiet I could hear the axe strikes echo off the hills for miles. It took them a full day to bring back a single log, dragged over rough ground by 4 men and 2 boys, stopping to rest every 100 paces, the wood leaving a scar in the earth behind it. I looked at that single log lying in the clearing, and I thought about 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, 30 cubits high. I thought about the ribs and the planking and the decking and the internal structure. Thousands of logs. Tens of thousands of days of labor. Noah stood over that first log and I saw him do the same calculation I'd just done. The same impossibilities settling into his bones. His wife brought him water and he drank it without taking his eyes off the timber. Then he picked up his adze and started shaping. That was the beginning. The years that followed were the strangest assignment I'd ever had. Not because of the danger, though there was plenty of that. Not because of the tedium, though guarding one family in one clearing while the world rotted around them tested my patience in ways battle never had. What made it strange was watching faith operate at that scale. Day after day after day, a man doing what made no sense because God had told him to. Noah didn't rush. He couldn't afford to. Every joint had to hold. Every plank had to fit. He taught his sons the work as they went. And they taught their wives when extra hands were needed for the heavy lifting. I watched Shem develop a carpenter's eye over the years, learning to read the grain of the wood, to know where it would bend and where it would break. Ham became the engineer, figuring out problems of structure and weight that would have challenged a crew 10 times their size. The frame went up first. Massive ribs of gopher wood curving upward from a keel that stretched longer than anything humans had built before. When the skeleton was complete, you could stand inside and look up through the bones of it at the sky, and it looked like the rib cage of some enormous creature. Then came the planking. Board after board, fitted and sealed with pitch inside and out. The smell of hot pitch became the smell of their lies. It was in their clothes, their hair, their skin. Noah's wife told him once that she couldn't remember what he'd smelled like before the ark. He laughed at that. It was the only time I heard him laugh during those years. The neighbors came to watch. At first it was curiosity. A few men from the nearest settlement walking over to see what Noah was building. They stood at the edge of the clearing and stared up at the growing frame, and I could see the questions forming on their faces. "What is it?" one of them asked. "A vessel," Noah said. He didn't stop working while he spoke. God is going to send a flood to destroy the earth. Everything that breathes will die. But God has made a covenant with my family, and this ark will carry us through. The silence that followed was almost physical. Then the neighbor laughed. Not a cruel laugh. Not yet. More confused, disbelieving. The laugh of someone who's just heard something so absurd that his mind can't process it any other way. A flood, the man repeated. Noah, it hasn't rained in weeks. It will, Noah said, and kept working. They left, still laughing, but they came back, and they brought others. Over the weeks and months, the clearing around the ark became a kind of attraction. People traveled from distant settlements to see the madman building a boat in the middle of dry land. The laughter sharpened over time. What started as confused amusement became mockery, then contempt. They called him names I won't repeat. They made songs about him. Children ran around the base of the ark, daring each other to climb it, while their parents stood nearby and jeered. Noah kept building. I wanted to hurt them. I know that's not what you'd expect from an angel, but I'm telling you what I felt. These people mocking a man who was trying to save them. Because Noah didn't just build. He spoke. Every person who came to laugh, he told them what was coming. He warned them, pleaded with them sometimes when the mockery wore him down enough to strip away his composure. They didn't listen, not one. Why doesn't God make them listen? I asked Hazel during one of his visits. He came by every few months, bringing news from other posts, checking on my state. He could see the assignment was wearing on me. You know why? Hazel said. The choice, I said. The choice. He looked at the ark, now nearly complete, towering above the clearing like a wooden mountain. He gives them a prophet. He gives them a warning. He gives them years to change their minds. What else should he do? Make it rain, I said. Show them one storm, one flood, something to make them believe. And then what? Hazel asked. They'd obey out of fear. That's not what he wants. I knew he was right. But knowing didn't help when I watched Noah come in from the clearing at dusk, shoulders hunched, pitch in his beard, the laughter of his neighbors still echoing behind him. His wife would meet him at the door. She never asked if anyone had listened. She could see it on his face. The attacks came at night. Not every night. The fallen were strategic about it. They'd leave Noah alone for weeks. Let my guard settle into routine, and then hit hard and fast when I least expected it. The first real assault came in the 3rd year of building. I was circling the perimeter of the clearing, half my attention on the ark, and half on the darkness beyond the tree line. Hazel was elsewhere that night. It was just me and 2 others, a small detail for a high-value target. They came out of the trees without warning. 7 of them, more than I'd ever faced alone. The other 2 on my detail engaged the first wave while I moved to cover Noah's shelter. One of the fallen broke through before I could close the gap. He was heading straight for the shelter where Noah and his family slept. Not to whisper, not to tempt, but to kill. I caught him 10 paces from the door. The impact drove us both into the ground. I felt his rage, hot and acidic, the particular hatred the fallen carry for anything God still loves. We fought in the dirt outside Noah's home, and it was nothing like the skirmishes I'd fought before. This was desperate, close, personal. His hands on my throat, my blade finding his side. The smell of something burning, ozone and sulfur, the air itself protesting what was happening. Noah's wife stirred inside. I heard her roll over, murmur something in her sleep. I drove the fallen back. Inch by inch, away from the shelter, away from the sleeping family. He snarled at me. a sound that had nothing human in it, nothing that had ever known worship or wonder. "You can't protect him forever," he said. "I don't have to," I said. "Just long enough." He retreated into the darkness. I stood there, bleeding from a wound in my shoulder, listening to Noah breathe through the thin walls of his shelter, asleep, unaware of how close it had been. The attacks got worse over the years. Larger groups, more coordinated. They tried to burn the ark once, a fire assault that took everything we had to extinguish. They tried to turn Noah's neighbors into a mob, whipping up rage until a group of men came to the clearing with torches and axes, intending to tear the whole thing down. That night, I didn't fight fallen angels. I stood between the mob and the ark and prayed, because I couldn't touch the humans and the fallen knew it. They'd used the humans as weapons. Noah came out of his shelter and faced them alone. I don't know what he said. He spoke for a long time, his voice low and steady against the shouting. The torches wavered. One by one, the men lowered them. They didn't leave because they believed him. They left because something in his certainty unnerved them. The calm of a man who knew exactly what was coming and couldn't be shaken from it. After they left, Noah's hands trembled for an hour. Then he picked up his tools. Decades passed. The ark grew. Noah's sons married, and their wives joined the work. I fought. I healed. I fought again. The world outside the clearing continued its descent, violence upon violence, corruption breeding corruption. The Nephilim grew in number and influence. Settlements that had once been peaceful became armed camps. I heard reports from other angels of horrors I couldn't have imagined when I first watched Adam name the animals. And still Noah hammered. Still the pitch boiled. Still the planks went up. I thought about what Hazel had said about faith and fear. Noah didn't build because he was afraid of the flood. He built because God had told him to. Every morning he woke up, looked at the impossible task in front of him, and picked up his tools. Not because the sky showed signs of rain. Not because his neighbors had started to believe. Because God had spoken, and Noah trusted the voice more than he trusted his eyes. I understood that. I'd been trusting the same voice since before the stars existed. But watching a human do it, a creature made from dust with a lifespan measured in decades, carrying a burden that would have broken most of us. That was different. That I hadn't seen before. Noah's faith wasn't prettier than mine. It was heavier. He carried it through exhaustion and mockery and loneliness, through years of swinging an adzay at wood that didn't seem to be turning into a boat fast enough, through nights when his wife wept quietly in their shelter because she missed the life they'd had before God spoke. He carried it anyway. The ark was finished on a morning so ordinary I almost missed the significance. Noah drove the last peg into the last plank, stepped back, and looked at what he'd built. The vessel stood above the clearing like a structure from another world. 3 decks, a window running along the top, one door set into the side, large enough for the biggest animals to pass through. Noah stood there looking at it, and his face held an expression I recognized. The same expression God had worn when he finished creating Adam. Not pride, completion, the feeling of a thing finally becoming what it was meant to be. Then the animals came. I'd fought battles. I'd watched creation unfold. I'd seen God breathe life into clay. But I'd never seen anything like this. They came from every direction. Not running, not panicked, but walking. Steady and deliberate, as if they'd received instructions only they could hear. Lions beside deer, wolves beside sheep, creatures that should have torn each other apart. Walking in pairs through the forest, past the settlement, past the stunned and silent neighbors, straight to the clearing where Noah waited. 2 by 2. each kind, male and female. The birds arrived in waves, settling on the upper structure of the ark, filling the air with calls and wing beats. The insects came in clouds, streams of tiny life pouring through the door. Cattle and goats and horses and creatures I'd never seen. Animals from lands so distant no human had walked there. The clean animals came in sevens. I noticed that. 7 pairs of each clean kind, 1 pair of each unclean. God had been specific. Noah stood at the door and watched them enter. He didn't have to guide them, didn't have to call them or herd them. They knew where to go. Some massive, invisible hand was directing traffic, and the animals obeyed with a simplicity that humans hadn't managed since the garden. His neighbors stopped laughing. I watched their faces as the parade continued. Hour after hour, animals streaming past them in an unbroken procession. The mockery drained away, replaced by something harder to name. Unease, maybe. The first faint suspicion that the madman with the boat might not have been mad at all. But they didn't come. Not one of them walked through that door. God gave them 7 more days. God gave them 7 more days after the animals entered. 7 days with the ark standing there, full of life, its door still open. 7 days for anyone to change their mind, to look at the impossible thing that had just happened and reconsider. Noah waited by the door. I knew what he was doing. He was hoping someone would come. After all the years of warning, after all the mockery and the loneliness. He stood at that door and hoped. Nobody came. On the 7th day, I felt the air change. Not like the shift before a storm. Heavier than that, the sky didn't darken. The wind didn't rise. But something in the atmosphere itself altered. A pressure building from so deep underground that you felt it in your bones rather than your ears. Noah looked at his wife. She looked back. No words. They didn't need them. She took his hand, and they walked inside together. Shem and his wife followed. Then Ham and his wife. Then Japheth and his wife. 8 people walking through a door into darkness, trusting that the God who had spoken to them in a clearing would hold them through what was coming. Then God shut the door. Not Noah, but God. I watched it happen. The massive door swinging closed on its own, settling into place with a sound that echoed across the clearing like a judge's final word. The pitch sealed around the edges. The seams disappeared. What had been an opening became a wall. The neighbors who had stayed to watch backed away. I saw it on their faces now. Not mockery, but fear. The animal parade had unsettled them, but this, a door closing by itself, sealed by an invisible hand that reached deeper. One woman took a step toward the ark, then stopped, looked at the sealed door, turned and walked back toward the settlement. I stood there in the clearing, looking at that sealed door, and I thought about the gate of Eden. Another boundary, another closing. Another moment when what had been accessible was shut away for good. Inside, I could hear the animals settling, the low of cattle and the bleating of sheep, the murmur of 8 human voices talking quietly in the dark. Outside, the world went on. The settlement fires burned. People ate and drank and argued and laughed the way they always had. The sky was still clear, but deep underground, I could feel the shift. Water gathering in places it had never gathered before. Pressure building in the springs of the deep, straining against rock that had held since creation. I looked up at the sky, and for the first time since God had spoken it into existence, I couldn't read it. The stars were there, the moon, the familiar patterns I'd known since before this world existed. But behind them, the heavens were different. The sky itself was getting ready to open. Hazel appeared beside me. I hadn't heard him approach. It's starting, he said quietly. I nodded. I could feel it. The whole earth could feel it if they'd been paying attention. Are you ready? He asked. I looked at the ark, at the sealed door, at the world that had 7 days left and didn't know it. No, I said. Hazel didn't argue. He just stood beside me, the way he always had. 2 warriors waiting for the terrible thing to begin. The sky held for now, but it wouldn't hold much longer.
Chapter Guild, Stories for Your Mind.